Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. Hugh, over to you.
Thank you, Alyssa, and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Securing Software Supply Chains, Critical Infrastructure Priorities for 2026. This is a collaborative webinar presented by Leadership Connect in partnership with Sonatype. My name's Hugh Murphy, and I'll serve as our moderator. And as 2025 comes to a close, leaders across the public and private sectors are facing growing pressure to secure the supply chains that power our most critical infrastructure. Cyber threats are more sophisticated, vendor dependencies are more complex, and new policy and regulatory priorities are beginning to take shape. In this 1 hour virtual session, we'll be bringing together experts from government and industry to discuss how to manage evolving threats, meet compliance expectations, and strengthen resilience heading into the new year. A few housekeeping notes before we begin. As many of you know, Leadership Connect is registered with the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy as a sponsor of continuing professional education on the National Registry of CPE sponsors. So specifically for this webinar, you'll receive up to one CPE credit in the information technology field of study. And in order to receive credit, please ensure you answer all three of the polling questions that will be presented throughout today's session. We also encourage you to ask questions, engage with our speakers, and share your insights throughout today's webinar. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Kevin Walsh, Director, Information Technology and Cybersecurity and Chief Operating Officer at Government Accountability Office. We have Donald Coulter, Senior Science Advisor, Cybersecurity in the Office of the Undersecretary in the Science and Technology Directorate at DHS. And Colonel Stephanie Horvath, Chief Information Security Officer, Department of Technology and Communications for the City of St. Paul, Minnesota, and also the Deputy Commanding General for U.S. Army Cyber Center of Excellence at the U.S. Army National Guard. And last, certainly not least, Antoine Harden, Regional Vice President of Federal Sales for Sonatype. So I'd love to get started. Welcome all of you on the panel. It's great to have you on board. I think it's going to be a great discussion today. Would love to give each of you a moment to do a further introduction and tell the audience a little bit about yourselves. So maybe we can start kind of go in order and start with Kevin.
Sure, and thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here today. And a minor correction: I am not the COO of GAO, just a Director of Information Technology and Cybersecurity. I do audit work, and that's going to have some implications for your nighttime reading if you ever need to go to sleep really quick, but also for how I kind of participate in this discussion because I'm not the one doing the thing. I'm the one making sure that others are doing that thing. So I hope it provides a different and interesting perspective. I do work not only related to artificial intelligence and cybersecurity and information technology, but also satellites, the census, CIO authority. So a wide range of perspectives in my personal soapbox to get up on today. In addition to AI, will also be legacy systems. So thanks for having me again.
Great. Thanks again, Kevin. Great to have you on board. Donald, can I pass it off to you next?
Excellent. Yeah. Thanks again for having me. Again, as the Senior Science Advisor for Cybersecurity at DHS, my focus is really across all of our R&D here. And so I look at some of the earlier and emerging technologies and lower TRL technologies and how we can mature those and translate those into operational capabilities. And part of that includes not only looking at securing our software supply chains, but also all of our kind of technological supply chains across the IT and OT spaces as well. So looking forward to the discussion and talking about how we can integrate a lot of our research and development partners into our overall mission and operational capabilities.
Great. Thanks so much, Donald. Stephanie?
Hi, good afternoon. Yes, really appreciate the opportunity today to talk about a critical subject. I am currently the CISO for the city of St. Paul, and previously, my career that has spanned a few decades includes both military assignments and civilian assignments, and delivering technology services as an IT director, and then also securing those services. So I kind of bring both lenses to how do we ensure we deliver secure and reliable technology.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Antoine?
Sure. Thanks for having me today, Hugh. And I'm really happy to be here with the panelists. So I'm Antoine Harden, Regional Vice President of Federal here at Sonatype. We provide open source and AI components, cybersecurity, and the software development lifecycle. Our goal is to really serve our customer, which is the federal government, and truly help them ensure that as they build software components and capabilities for either the warfighter or the citizens, that those are secure and that, we partner with them so they can, fulfill their mission.
Great. Thanks so much, Antoine. And really great to have all of you on board. I think it's going to be a really interesting discussion. You all bring a different perspective to this conversation. So one of the first sort of themes we wanted to touch on was just thinking about risk and resilience and how we can manage threats in real time. And Antoine, maybe I can start with you and open it up to all of you. But, is there one kind of emerging software supply chain risk that you've seen rise to the top this year? And, how has that impacted your teams and those you're working with?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think, there's a lot of things, but if there's one that rises to the top, I think the rise of AI generated open source components, right? They're fast, they're abundant, but they're often unaudited, right? So there's no provenance and they haven't gone through, the software development lifecycle as it should. So it's going to dramatically increase the uncertainty and the dependency chains. So I think that it causes proliferation because there's so much AI generated and open source components out there that the agencies really don't have a good grasp for how proliferated it is throughout their agencies.
Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe Kevin, do you have, I know.
Yeah, I'd happy to jump in. I agree with Anton. Um, excuse me, Antoine. Uh, and yeah, man, how hard is it to really know, hey, we use this big mammoth enterprise piece of software, and knowing all the little pieces and tracking down all the little threads, talk about going down just one piece of software is a rabbit hole. Having to go do that for every single piece of software that's in your organization, let alone the shadow IT that may or may not be there. I do not envy anyone going down that series of rabbit holes. It's a tough task, but if you want to, man, you almost have to attempt it if you want to, do your due diligence to make sure you have security adequately.
Absolutely. Donald? Yeah,
Yeah,
Donald.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a daunting task. I think that piggybacking on it, a lot of some of the components and tools that people are using to build software and is generating some AI slop and also um, facilitating some slop squatting type attacks. So we're like, are these packages and things that we're pulling in our software, are they real? Were they developed? They're benign. How do we start testing and identifying these packages, and how do we start inserting what's really in here, and how do we get that prevalence and insight across this when it's happening across these enterprises? And for us, we're looking at like across sectors that are important to like national security and thinking, how do we identify and know these things are there in a secure way, and how do we identify and collaborate with people, especially when all of these partners are not necessarily like government agencies as well. It's a lot of private and public partnerships. So identifying that within your organizations, identifying it across a broad sector is even more challenging.
The good news, Donald, is that now that AI is here, it's going to fix everything. Um, Not quite as tongue in cheek. We saw a few weeks ago Anthropic, Claude being used for automated attacks on 30 plus large organizations. I I don't think that's going to become any less common. I suspect that, supply chain attacks, if they're not already going on using that kind of automated jailbroken, ChatGPT, Claude, Anthropic, Gemini, whatever, that they will be coming. The good news, though, is that this is a double-edged sword. We can use AI to attack and defend. And I'm normally one pumping the brakes on, hey, let's think carefully before we use AI and throw AI at everything. But the great thing about AI as it comes to, you know, eh, defense is it can boost our defenders. It can make them more capable and more enabled. Um, but I think I worry about seeing that kind of order of magnitude and scale being applied to this area.
Yeah. Stephanie, you similar thoughts, or love to hear how your team's adapting too to like just the pace and complexity of the different activities.
Right. Just real quickly to kind of round out this
Yeah.
concept of supply chain attacks, and starting with Antoine's use of the word proliferation, I think that cannot be emphasized enough. You see the supply chain attacks in commercial software, the integrations between these really large software programs that are used extensively by many, many companies. You see the attacks hitting the developer environments, the NPM poisoning that's happening. And I think we just don't want to forget that these supply chain attacks are impacting legitimate websites. And so when we think about the click fix technique or the drive-by compromise, this is impacting everyday people just going to regular websites, and they're faced with or presented with a dialog box that says, hey, I'll help you update your browser, or let's run this secure software. And it just doesn't look like the old school, easily spoofable message dialog boxes. They look very, very legitimate. But instead of downloading a browser update, you're downloading a malicious payload. So the proliferation of these supply chain attacks is just so broad and deep, and it just requires really understanding how are we going to have a multifaceted remediation approach to all these different attacks. So glad you guys are using this today to discuss this topic.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And you mentioned like kind of a multifaceted approach. Anything else that, and maybe sort of a two-part question, I guess, for you all, like, are there other things you can do to, to adapt to the pace and complexity of these activities, or, and also kind of related, what maybe are there best practices that have helped kind of build some resilience into the supply chain to try to ward off of these. Stephanie, yeah, see you're nodding. I'll let you take the first crack at it.
Sure, sure. I really think we have to change our mindset, and that is to stop kicking each other and just start kicking the attacker out. We blame and shame the person who may have clicked on the link. There's tension between the business side or the technology. There's tension between the technology department, between system administrators or the firewall guy or whoever is just trying to, remediate a vulnerability. So we got to stop kicking each other and come together, resource the funding, the tooling, the staffing that we need, because you do need additional detection tools to find the rogue AI agent running around in the network. Or we do need better telemetry to understand, is this device that is communicating, and it's using RDP, is it good or bad? And we can only get to that point when we have more people that are involved in actually building the resilience, right? Incident response planning. Are we going to give it to one person? No, this has got to be everybody's going to have to contribute to the incident response planning in order to identify, detect, and respond in what we are going to face in this new age of AI. You know, the one thing else I would mention is that I think it is important to have the groups like the OWASP, the ICS, 2, ISACA, Cloud Security Alliance. All of these groups provide, you know, they provide additional grounded expertise, and it's vendor agnostic, it's very in-depth, and that helps all of the practitioners have better foundational understanding of the technology or any of the threats that we're facing. So that I think those external groups really add to our resiliency as well.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, that's great. I know we plan to definitely dig in a little more to some of the collaboration that takes place that can really be helpful here. Donald, anything on from your side in terms of
Yeah, I
you know
think
how
what
to help build resilience and
yeah, I think
adapt?
one of the key things that Stephanie mentioned or made me think of when she was talking was really about people have to care, and we have to equip the general, both the user base and like our focus security specialists with the tools they need. But we have to get like people that are aware and then give them the tools to be successful. And we can't, as you said, we can't pick people for not knowing what to do and not knowing how to avoid some of these attacks because you're being bombarded all the time. So we have to be able to build in the security into the systems that people are using to reduce the likelihood that they'll even make it to a user where it will affect them. And also build in the way that we design and engineer these systems, right? The people that are developing our code and developing these technology systems, they need to know how to do that securely. And so we got to update our curriculum and our training practice in a way that we operate with when you're actually in an environment where you're building tools. And that's also especially important when we think about our open source community partners that are kind of developing, and you kind of you get what you get, right? So we have to make it. We can't burden them with an onerous set of kind of these tasks that don't add value to the development experience from their perspective. We have to build in, make it easy for people and seamless and kind of background for them to develop technology securely. And that, so it's like, why, how are we adapting? I think one of the things we have to do is just take long-term approaches that we've always known, which just, do things securely. These will still stave off a lot of these new adaptations that are really just new takes on age-old attacks.
Yeah, thanks, Donald. Antoine, from your work with different federal agencies, are there some common security gaps or oversights you've encountered, or how different leaders are doing a good job addressing them?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. I think we're seeing a couple different things. One is I want to piggyback on what Donald and Stephanie said earlier. I agree with them wholeheartedly. It is we truly have to stop just bashing the person that made a mistake and clicked on that link, right? But I think it starts with creating uh, understanding what the expectations are, right? What is the end goal and what should that look like? And then creating the repeatable processes that you can plug into so it's not this, quite often people think security is going to, smack their hand or if it's difficult to work with these folks. So all they do is say no, right? But if we can put what we're expecting out there, create the repeatable processes that folks can plug into and feel confident about. I can go here and get these components and do my job and not have to worry about X, Y, and Z because the folks that are responsible, so to speak, for securing this infrastructure, they've done their job so I can go here and get what I need to do my job without worrying about it, right? And I think that's where we need to get to is understanding, agency to understand where they want to be and then create the process on how they get there and not, and hold the people accountable at every aspect of that.
Yeah,
Does
So
that make sense?
I too,
absolutely. Yeah, go
I
ahead, Kevin.
I too want to piggyback on what Donald and Stephanie were saying. I like the aspects of both of theirs. Donald, at one point you kind of mentioned going back to what always worked, the basic level security stuff, using multi-factor authentication, making sure your software is up to date, keeping offline backups, having strong passwords, monitoring your network. That all is still going to be important, yesterday, today, and years from now. With regards to specific software attacks or supply chain attacks, I think securing the endpoints, securing the data endpoints, doing things like rate limiting, authentication, monitoring APIs, and having authorization protocols can also really help. But that's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is what we've been talking about, the people aspect. And eventually, I mean, we all work for large organizations. Eventually, somebody's going to get tricked. These bad guys, whether we're talking about nation state actors or, script kiddies or whatever, you know, this is what they do all day, every day. They're thinking about ways to trick people, and eventually, it's not if, it's when. And so, whatever we can do to, limit the exposure, not only by knowing where possible vulnerabilities or critical pieces may be, but also trying to, lock it down so that if they do get in and when they do get in, it's not a cascade of, okay, well, they got this system. Now they got this and this and this and this and this. You know, I, I, I don't know. I'm an auditor. I'm not the one doing the things, but this is just, third party perspective.
Awesome. Well, great. I think we're gonna take a minute and get some feedback from the audience here with our first polling question, and which is, what's your organization's biggest challenge when it comes to securing your software supply chain? Um, is it visibility across vendors and third parties, keeping up with the evolving threats, meeting compliance requirements, or resourcing or staffing constraints? I know we all have them, but maybe some people may say none of the above. But we'll definitely do that, and then I think we can kind of shift gears a little bit. I know we won't get too policy heavy, but just want to we'll talk a little bit next about just how we can you know address some of these things. And I think we have our audience results here, so I want to kind of get your feedback, or let's take a look. It is spread out with a couple of things, visibility across vendors and third parties, and keeping up with the evolving threats. I think those are those both make a lot of sense. Um, Followed by compliance requirements and resources and staffing. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit, but when you think about, policy and kind of compliance, are there any things, any policy related things or that you expect will have the most impact or influence over supply chain security going into 2026? One, I don't know, Donald or Stephanie, have you kind of seen that when you think about approaching vendors, like, vendor oversight, or kind of ensuring they're compliant and kind of sharing the accountability? Do you have any examples there you'd like to share?
Oh, yeah. So when it comes to vendors, yes, we've had a security addendum as part of the contract process for, several years. And then we just keep adding to it because 2 years ago, the security addendum did not include anything related to AI, but now it does. There's an entire, section just in adhering to some sort of some AI framework. And so, but we're also looking at, at some point it becomes too much for one person to successfully truly review a vendor. And so there are some pretty good, amazing products out there that are, third party assessors, some sort of assessment application. And they are very good. They are very good. Going back to, policy or regulatory decisions, there is one I just kind of want to bring up. It might be a little more futuristic, but I think it's interesting. The recent FCC decision to drop cybersecurity requirements for telco companies, I think when you have to kind of go into the FCC's news release, and it was very interesting. There was one sentence that really caught my attention, and that is, looking the fact that the FCC really engaged with the providers to understand, okay, what can we secure first? What can we expect from these providers to secure first? Because it's the most targeted, it's most important for preventing another salt typhoon kind of attack. And that the providers did apply security, and they're addressing the most critical security risks while kind of avoiding inflexible or ambiguous requirements. And that's again the mindset that we need policymakers, audit people to understand, is that we need functional security. We still have to operate. We still are, whether you're supporting the services for a small city, big city, large city, county, state government, federal government, the IT service plan is a plan that is just, it's never in a vacuum. And it is just years of whether there is tech debt or different initiatives, and we have integrated systems that adds a level of complexity that cannot be diminished by some sort of simple checklist audit. And so what I really liked about that FCC decision was collaboration between the government and the industry to really get after what do you have to secure now, and what can we be a little bit more flexible so you can still operate, but at least at a somewhat an elevated security posture. So that was a decision I was actually happy to see.
That's great. Thanks, Stephanie. Donald or Kevin, anything you'd like to add about this?
I can jump in first, Donald. I still think Executive Order 14028, to rattle off a list of numbers. That's the executive order that came out after some of the early supply chain attacks. It's basically about improving the nation's cybersecurity, and it was the EO that required supply chain risk management practices. And I think I mean, that's kind of the foundation that this is all getting built upon. Antoine mentioned the NIST aspects of it, and I think that tracks back into this as well. So I think that's one of the most relevant. But I also think, if you're looking into the future, I still think we have not done enough in this space, which makes me worried that, what the next thing is. Is the next Salt Typhoon going to be even worse? At one point, talking to Tony Scott, the prior federal CIO, he always said never waste a good emergency, but he also said, I don't think we've had a true cybersecurity emergency that impacts our everyday citizens yet. Is there going to be a digital Pearl Harbor? Man, I really hope not. But supply chain is potential. It has the potential to be that kind of impactful thing that impacts everybody, moms, dads, kids, grandparents, everybody. If you lose internet services for a week, that's not good.
Well, I think, yeah, one of the interesting things about that is that the risks are not necessarily so like acute and like moment instantaneously felt like a digital Pearl Harbor. Like it can be a burrowing into the supply chain and it's nesting there, siphoning data, messing with the integrity of the stuff you use, and that stuff is feeding everything. I think about EO 14306 and even some of the uh,
I feel like we're having a
recommendations.
competition of
I
who can
know, right?
remember
Like
the
we got to
five
get
string
these
numbers.
EOs,
Yeah.
right? But we think about even the data sets and thinking about the cybersecurity data sets for research, thinking about how do we make sure that all the data sets that are going into that are training these tools, that are going into our models that we're using and capturing, how are we making sure that those remain secure? And how are we making sure that they're accurate and that these tools that are not drifting over time? So I think part of that supply chain is not just like our traditional software and hardware that we're traditionally used to, is thinking about how do you secure the data that's going into these systems and these tools and starting from the ground up. That's going to get us in. If these things are burrowing in, then people are using them, and you're training your tools based on that. You might not even know that. You won't know. It won't even be like one big catastrophic thing. You're just like, oh, this thing was just feeding me bad, slightly bad recommendations that led me down a trail for like years, and I just really didn't realize it.
This is really dating me, but that's like the old, I mean, Superman or Office Space, where the goal wasn't to steal tons of money all at once. It
Yep,
was to shave a fraction of a penny off every transaction.
yep.
And over time, the weight of that, I mean, it adds up.
Yeah, what if we're mixing a mixture of like uh overabundance and relying on these technologies to help us make decisions, and losing our own ability, our independent judgment, human and wisdom and discernment, while those tools are also being subverted and decreasing their accuracy in what they're even recommending to us. That's like a double whammy right there.
Right? I mean, you saw uh, what's the XAI, turn into Mecha Hitler like a few months back. Like, who knows exactly how those LLM agents are being, what the instructions are behind the scenes. And if it's one thing if, we got, US folks, US companies controlling it, but if it's another if, surreptitiously someone's injecting something and corrupting things that we're using to make important decisions. That impacts not just the IT portion of the economy, but the world and the country writ large.
No, absolutely. I definitely want to continue on talking a little more about resilient operations and kind of those disruptions and what we can do there. Wanted to open it up to the audience with our second question. When it comes to policy and compliance, what does your organization need most? Is it regulatory guidance? Is it internal coordination? Other tools to track and monitor? Or other external support or assessments. So I'd love to hear what the audience has to say there. And I think I really want to kind of talk more about resilient operations, kind of minimizing these disruptions, and hopefully we'll get some good thoughts around that. I guess maybe while we're waiting for the results, I'll ask you, Kevin, like how can organizations approach like kind of we talked in our prep call a lot about like legacy systems and how can organizations approach like revamping those legacy systems and infrastructure to adapt to all this change?
Yeah, I mean that's literally the multi-billion-dollar question that we're seeing play out not just in the government, but I mean the prime example right now that's on my mind is FAA and their air traffic control. Um, Secretary Duffy says that he thinks it's going to take about $30 billion to, revamp the air traffic control systems, and Congress appropriated 12 billion of that this past year. So legacy systems is not a quick, easy, oh, just turn it off. These systems also aren't as old as people think. I mean, it's not like in Indiana Jones where, they're stored in some dusty warehouse somewhere and forgotten. Some of these systems are just quietly working away and doing their jobs competently. And I don't think those are necessarily a problem. Understand it, figure out what it does. If it can't have modern security protocols, wrap it in a box and do your best to protect it and reduce its attack surface. Um, but I think part of this, whether we're talking legacy systems, supply chain, a lot of this comes down to basics portfolio management. You got to know what you have if you're going to be able to protect it, or if you're going to be able to, noodle through all the different rabbit holes of what you've got. So I think having that firm understanding of everything that's on your network, and part of that is, you know, network monitoring. Shadow IT is a thing. Somebody's always going to plug something into, some router somewhere. Um, and I guess, you know, software supply chain matters, hardware supply chain also matters, but those alone won't be sufficient. You also need good operational cyber hygiene. You need that knowledge of your organization and to keep doing ongoing maintenance, oversight, updates, and education. I want to bring it back to that. It always comes back to the employee, even though security training is oh so fun. But yeah, that's I think the link to legacy.
No, that's interesting. Looking at the results from the last question, the overwhelming response was, asking for tools to track and monitor compliance in these things. So definitely something to touch on there. I guess Donald and or Stephanie, anything you want to add in terms of looking at how to approach your legacy systems or just as as Kevin mentioned, kind of that portfolio management as well and just staying on top of things.
Legacy. I'm in R&D. We don't care about legacy.
You just
No,
build it and then it's somebody else's problem.
That's
yeah,
it.
hey, I mean, let's see. But in all seriousness, one of the that's really a key area, right? In order to actually transition R&D, you have to have some context of you're actually going to use this thing. How can you make those plans earlier so they can actually be ready to start inserting some of those technologies and some of those new capabilities? And one of the things that the research community can do a better job of is helping people identify where the highest, I guess, critical areas of risk are for them and start like transitioning those and knocking down that risk and knocking down that technical debt uh, piece by piece, right? So that if we're concentrating on delivering technologies and we can help people over time transition, for instance, one of the areas that we're actively engaged in is transitioning these software towards memory safe languages, right? So you can't do it all in one day. You can't overhaul any non-trivial software package in one fell swoop. So we are working on smaller tools that can help you identify small chunks that you can translate, and we're also working on doing the research that can help someone who's trying to make a decision, a business decision on when do I make this conversion, helping them understand the ROI and the potential impacts and how to choose which parts of their systems to address first. So I think part of that is that knowledge, that education and awareness, and that's something that I think the research community can continue to help us understand the ramifications and make better decisions. This tough path because there are limited resources, and you're fighting with a lot of different opportunities costs that you're trading on.
Thanks, so. Stephanie, anything you want to add?
I guess just a quick add-on, or maybe dig a little bit deeper into Hugh's comment about portfolio management. That really does matter. Understanding your applications, and if you have older legacy applications, do you know the purpose and the data and the operating system? Is it on some sort of like modernization glide path? Do you have a risk assessment around some of these applications? And again, it's just giving you the values or variables that you can have tangible conversations about. And if you in trying not to be the office of no, being very creative in terms like this is an application, the data is important, it is an older operating system. Can we limit it by IP restrictions? Can we limit it about? Can we limit exposure by reducing, what account is accessing, what processes are going on in that system? Are we monitoring it? I mean, there are ways to keep something going in a knowable way, in a restricted, at least some secure manner until, does a path, allow us in a year to, what's the plan of action or milestones? Can we upgrade it? Can we move it? Just pull the data off, the old ETL process. It just takes time and people to have these sort of conversations is what makes it tricky. And not to even mention like integrations and all that kind of stuff. But portfolio, I think, is a good way to bring people together to talk about some of those legacy applications.
Yeah. No, you've all touched on so many great things, portfolio management and limiting exposure. Obviously, Donald, as you said, like from the R&D perspective as well. All of that kind of requires a lot of coordination with different groups. Any good examples, of that coordinated effort between, IT, procurement, policy units, that kind of help solve this issue? I'll sort of open that to anyone who may have an example or maybe just a thought around that.
Oh, happy to sound off on geo work. Um, my apologies. So we did some work a few years back looking at FITARA, the Federal IT Acquisition Reform Act. And one of the requirements in there is that CIOs review and approve every IT contract, which is at its face just ridiculous. Thousands and thousands and thousands of contracts, and CIOs are supposed to be signing off on individual ones. So OMB in their implementation guidance changed it to procurement plans rather than IT contracts, which is a great move. But even when we looked at that level, we found that a lot of times the CIO shop didn't know about procurements with IT in it. And it was that somebody has to be willing to reach across that cubicle wall and say, "Hey, did you know about this?" And I think it's that C-suite, or, the office of the CIO or the Chico or the CFO, people working together and saying, "Hey, let's make sure we're on the same page. Let's make sure before we buy this, new financial management software that it's going to play nice with the other software or, whatever." I think I think people working together, people are simultaneously the problem. They're the ones who are going to get, fished or whatever, but they're also the solution because when they work together, they're incredibly powerful.
Yeah, no, that's great, Kevin. Um, I guess, Antoine, where should organizations start if they want to reduce supply chain disruption risk without really overhauling everything?
Let me get off mute there. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think the most impactful first step that they can do is really establish a deep continuous visibility into the software that they already use, right? And then automate the enforcement of that from non-negotiable security practices. I think it was alluded to earlier, and I think the three ways they do that is one, start with the critical 10%, right? Don't try to and use S-bombs or software bill of materials for those high value assets, right? So don't try to generate an SBOM for every single application all at once. Identify the 10 to 20% of applications that support your mission critical functions or handle the most sensitive data, right? And then mandate an accurate, actionable SBOM for all of those immediately. And then this high priority focus will help provide the biggest reduction in risk for the least amount of effort. The second thing I think they'll do is automate policy enforcement at the gate. And what I mean by that is implement, an automated firewall policy as an example, right? For every single software artifact, both third party and internally developed. That's the critical key, right? So oftentimes we think, oh, we developed it internally, it must be safe already, right? Everything's great. So I think you create that automated, firewall policy for again the third party and internally developed applications, and what that's going to do is it's going to help you block the known bad components before they actually enter your pipeline or your production environment. So, and then lastly, I think, this buzzword is around all the time, but I truly do believe you need to implement a zero trust principles but specific to the SDLC, right? A lot of times people forget about that. They think this zero trust is this big umbrella, which it is, but I think you need to implement it, very strategically. And I think once you do that from this SDLC perspective, and you do that by applying the least privileged access, right, through all your development tools and your build environment. So that means every single developer, every machine, and the pipeline should be authenticated and authorized from a just-in-time motion, right? And what I mean by that is if you do that appropriately, and I think Stephanie, you mentioned it earlier, or maybe it was Donald, but if you do those three things, I think it truly shrinks the blast radius, right? So if you do get attacked, it's only compromising a single account or a single system, in theory. So I think those are the three ways that agencies could start right now and be effective in, securing the SDLC. Donald, you shook your head, so I think you must agree a little bit
Yeah.
there.
I definitely know, but I was also laughing at the same time. Like, I'm a developer. I need super admin access. I can't be constrained by.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, good. Let's turn to the audience one last time today. Which of the following would you most strengthen? Which of the following would most strengthen your operational resilience for 2026? And is it improved vendor inventory and visibility, continuous monitoring and alerts, better collaboration with partners, incident response planning, or executive alignment and funding? So curious to hear what the audience has to say in their organizations. And I think as we kind of roll into our final segment here, really want to talk a little more about that cross-sector collaboration. Again, I know we touched on it a little bit today, but would like to dive in a little bit more and then kind of finish up on just give you all an opportunity to talk about some takeaways as we wrap up here. Um, but I guess while we're waiting for the audience, I guess what are some examples you've all seen that were kind of successful cross-sector collaboration when it comes to software supply chain security? Anyone want to share a story or example where they've seen some really good cross-sector collaboration? While we're thinking on that, you can see the responses. Again, the monitoring and alerts that's kind of coming up as a theme today on a couple of occasions. Also mentioned, better collaboration and executive alignment and funding. So a little bit of split there, but any examples you all have where you've kind of seen kind of that collaboration really work well, and any examples, Donald?
Yeah, I'll kind of share something. So I co-chair a interagency forum that's focused on systems security engineering and software assurance and all kind of these topics. And one of the interesting things, to rattle off more numbers, Special Pub 800-161, and it talks about supply chain risk management approaches. And we are actually doing some experimentation, or really like program level experimentation, in terms of, can I just manage the supply chain and security risks of the system engineering process or program of record through that lens, as opposed to using like an RMF or framework as the lens that we do a bunch of controls and checking on, and then seeing, can we actually collaborate with the CIO office to certify and credit those types of systems, and have some confidence that those can work. And so organizations I've seen in one agency do it well and share their lessons learned, and also some of the challenges that they face. And now that's actually spreading across different government organizations and agencies as they're trying new approaches and being more flexible towards the way they approach their cyber resilience program and supply chain risk program. So that's one area that I'm excited about, the sharing across organizations. And these are folks in different sections of, like, there's military involved and just kind of regular civilian agencies involved. So their approaches are being applied to different kind of missions and environments, but we're collaborating and sharing that information across to improve resilience across the board.
Yeah, and Hugh, one of the things I'm seeing, I'm a part of ATARC. We're part of, they have a DevSecOps working group where it's industry and government. We come together, and we meet weekly, bi-weekly, we collaborate, we talk about issues at hand and specific to government agencies. But then we also produce artifacts and white papers and recommendations on different practices and different, philosophies or things that they could implement now, that where we've come together from both industry and government with the issues that might be at hand, and different procedures and practices, if you will, on how to implement different DevSecOps capabilities. So that's one of the examples that I've seen where across industry and private and public sector collaboration comes to produce actionable artifacts that agencies can leverage right away. So that's an example as well.
That's great. Thanks, Antoine. Stephanie, anything from your side where you've experienced some good outcomes with collaboration?
So we have dealt with numerous issues, in the city of St. Paul did endure a pretty intense ransomware attack in July of this year. And the collaboration through multiple agencies, national level, multiple agencies, state level, and county, to include bringing in the National Guard Cyber Protection Team, really accelerated our response, accelerated our information sharing. Within 24 hours of the attack, we shared indicators of compromise to make sure that those could be shared more broadly across the state. And so, I mean, certainly the collaboration just has to be in the prevention, in the detection, and in the response, and all of those categories. And what really bridges or strengthens, kind of buttresses the connective, that connective tissue between different agencies is the tooling. And the state of Minnesota offers tools like the EDR tool or MDR tool, and offers that tool at a subsidized rate for cities and counties. We have to realize that cities and counties do not have big budgets. And everything that we talk about in the audits and the zero trust architecture, nobody ever says the number of people it takes to pass this audit or the number of people it takes to enable network access control over an entire city. These are high dollars, and cities and counties are trying to build bridges and provide parks and everything that underpins civil society. So when a state can kind of collaborate on good pricing for tools, not only is it cost affordable for that, the cities, counties, and the state that is, doing a lot of information sharing, and now it's securing those communication channels, but also, so it's cost affordability and, a more consolidated collaborative approach for security. That's very critical.
Thanks, Stephanie. Antoine, maybe from your perspective, what role can solution providers like Sonatype play in helping agencies future-proof their security?
Yeah, that's a good question, Hugh. I think, solution providers like Sonatype are truly essential in helping agencies accelerate their maturity by providing automation, intelligence, and scale, right, necessary to handle the complexities of today's modern software supply chain. I think it's forever evolving, and they can do that in a couple different ways. One is, they can deliver solution providers can help provide by delivering actionable intelligence and not just data. And what I mean by that is the challenge isn't a lack of security data, right? There's SBOMs, there's vulnerability assessment reports, there's all this data out there, but I think it's a lack of actionable intelligence. What are we doing with it, right? Providers really have to try to automate as much as possible the analysis of components to determine what the true risk is, not just the vulnerability. I have a vulnerability. How could I prevent it? And then what do I do about it, right? And then how do I create this process so it doesn't happen again? And then the second thing I think is, solution providers can help agencies by automating policy and enforcement, right? We need to provide that policy enforcement layer, if you will, for DevSecOps in general. I think this includes tools, for continuous component analysis, to help block known bad components from ever entering the pipeline in general, and then automatically verifying that artifact integrity, right? And then lastly, I think, we have to drive standardization and collaboration. We truly have to partner with some of the things we just talked about a second ago. Agency and public sector industry needs to continue to collaborate together, but the providers have to build these solutions that align with and help agencies implement the federal mandates that we just talked about, right? Provide frameworks and capabilities that plug and play and help them produce the information that's needed to fulfill that mandate. and then make sure they continuously drive that as they build out solutions that the agencies are going to be leveraging. So I think those are three ways that solution providers can help you know agency future-proof their security.
Awesome. Thanks, Antoine. Yeah, great points there. And I know we only have a few minutes left. I just want to remind the audience there is a Q&A button there at the bottom if anyone has any questions for our panel. But as we wrap up, maybe I'll just give each of you a chance to kind of share your final thoughts on any takeaways you want to leave us with, and as we kind of wrap up the calendar year and move into 2026. Is there any, one lesson learned or something that you think is really important to consider for 2026? I'll kind of give you all an opportunity to speak to that for a quick minute here. Maybe Donald, do you want to start first?
Yeah, I think I just want to piggyback off that the ability to collaborate, both like humans and organizations collaborating with each other, but also setting up our our technologies and our tools to be able to interoperate through standards-based interfaces with each other. The challenges of securing your software, your technology, through your supply chain, and ultimately through your organization's mission chain are so complex and require different tools all across that life cycle and tooling. So that the more flexibility that people have to be able to take in a tool and use it what it's best for, but also take that information out and spit it into another tool that does its part. That's what's going to give us actionable intelligence. So that's what we need. I think that's where industry and our partners are going, and that's what I think yeah, but public and private sector folks are looking forward to expanding our shared capacity, because ultimately this our supply chain is a national supply chain, and so if we have a risk and a challenge on any part of it, it's going to affect us all. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Donald. Stephanie?
Data security to minimize disruption and future-proof. So focusing on where the data that's most critical, that's most sensitive, know where it is, build the, understand how to monitor and secure those pathways to the data. Data security is also a prerequisite for AI, for implementing more AI models, really knowing your data.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. Kevin?
I'm going to reiterate the back to the basics approach here. Have MFA, update your software, keep your backups offline, and don't do what Korea did and your backups don't work. Strong passwords and monitor your network, including this will help software supply chain. Secure the endpoints, rate limiting, monitor your APIs, and have some good authentication and authorization protocols.
Thanks, Kevin. And Antoine?
Yeah, I think that the most successful teams build repeatable automated processes rather than relying on tacit knowledge, right? So I think that's one. And the second thing I'll say is reactive vulnerability management is no longer sufficient, right? We have to have preemptive preemptive policy enforcement that happens upstream, and then shifting everything left. I think if you move security to the left and include it a part of your CI/CD pipelines and in part of your software development lifecycle process in totality and continuously monitor that, I think that's when you'll be better off, and agencies will be able to respond to things quicker and pinpoint exactly where to go. So those are the couple of things that I think agencies could do moving forward.
Thanks, Antoine. Well, we're right here at time. I just want to thank our audience, everyone who dialed in today. Hopefully, it was really worthwhile and valuable for you all. Love to thank our panelists, Kevin, Stephanie, Donald, Antoine. Thank you all. You really brought a lot of great insights to the discussion today. And again, thank you to Sonatype for partnering with us, sponsoring this event. It's been a really good session. For anyone interested in continuing the supply chain conversation, we'll be right back here next week on the 11th at 2 o'clock, and diving a little further into the leveraging AI against supply chain threats. So stay tuned for that. But thank you all again, and hope you all have a great afternoon, and we'll speak soon.